Yeah, I want to get a little clarity on North and Ought. On one of the CDs you had explained that once you get past the level 9, or the ninth plane, you get into Ought. And things on that, beyond that, don't deal in relativity, like things prior to that. And I want to know, how do things exist, for lack of a better word, in Ought without being relative?
Well, you got to repeat what you said to get your own answer. You said once it is past North and Ought. So it can't exist in Ought or North. It's past North and Ought. Then it gets into 9, where things are not relative because things don't relate or interact by their variances or differences. Whereas all, there's no variance or differences. In order for you to have relativity, you must have things relating one to the other. As long as we are beneath 9, one being 8, which comes at 4 and 4, where the spirit, where mental and spiritual become one, or on down. And then remember, you have the lower, they go to the 9th chamber, which is beneath, which starts another level of intellect. The lower is the physical, and the higher, of course, becomes the spiritual. When you get to the 9th point, then you don't have any more related figures. This is why they say 10. When they say 10, they're saying 1 all over again. They started from the beginning, because the cipher, we know, is valueless or worthless or sumless. You follow? So when you get past 8, you get past 4 and 4, that's Ought and North. And then when you get to 9, there's no relativity. There's nothing that relates. You follow? Everything just is. Right?
So, in the state of North or beyond that state, is that like the...
North and Ought interact in you as will. That which you ought to do and that which you should or not to do. That's all Ought and North is that which is to be done and that which is not to be done. The Hindu and Sanskrit might have call it yin and yang. In ancient Egyptian, they call it Shen and Shem. So that how that does with what that which should be done versus that which should not be done, or that which one does and that which one does not. It has no relationship to good and evil, or bad and good, as we say, or right and wrong. This has to do because, let's say, evil to satanic worship is not evil. So in that case, our North becomes their Ought. It's going in a vicious circle of who's right and who's wrong.
So they make things at that point beyond, I don't know, it's kind of...
because things. You see, every time you reach that level, now you got to say things. And things are determined by differentiation, sum, density, weight, space, time. When you get to that point, there's no more things. Things is the problem. Because when, in reality, what we spoke about last week, when an individual belongs to a religion, identifies with one God, and a Muslim will say, La Sharika Lahu, or Kul Hu Allahu Ahad, He Allah is one, there's no partners with Him, then who are you? Then you become the second part. The person that's there to make the statement, there's one God. So we all say, no, there's no pantheism or there's no pluralization in gods. There's only one God. The next question to that person is, are you that God? If they say no, then say, then what part do you play in it? If the whole universe is unified under God as God, and you're not God, then aren't you the second part? And doesn't that therefore take away from what you refer to as the divine union of God, or the tawheed of God, or oneness of God, by virtue of the fact that you're here to declare Allah's oneness? When you say Allahu Samad, or that He is absolute in some translations and self-sustaining and self-sufficient in others, you know, if you do that, He's self-sufficient from what? And what does He subsist on? And what is it that why is it necessary for Him to become self-sufficient? I'm saying that because when you get past that 9, there's no more things. Because the first thing would be God. And that's what every Muslim, Christian, and Jew would say. The first thing in existence would have to be God, the one Almighty God. Correct? Or Allahu Ahad. You know, Allah is one. Or in the Hebrew they say Elohim Ahad. Then there's 9. In this case they're going Elohim plural is Ahad. One group of Elohims. But it keeps going back to that same principle. And I'm saying, how do you differentiate God as one if you're not here to say God is one? And if you're here to say God is one, then you're the second part or person here making the statement. You're the one responsible for the duality by virtue of the fact that you find it necessary to say God is one. You follow what I'm saying? It's a very tricky thing. Go ahead.
I don't, for lack of a better word, think these word things, but say beyond.
Say it again.
I'm trying to say, for lack of a better word, I'm going to say things.
Oh, okay.
Okay. For lack of a better word, things beyond that state, the 9th state.
Now what you want me to do is you want me to play a game with you. You want me to go into an area where you don't have the proper question and give you a proper answer. So just saying, for lack of a better word, beyond those things where things are, now you don't expect me to add the missing pieces to your puzzle.
I don't have a word?
Neither do I, because there is no words for it, because the word becomes flesh the moment it's spoken. You know what I'm saying? The word becomes flesh the moment it's spoken. So anything that you can call a word is a noun, which is a person, a place, or a thing. And that's the realm in which I told you you're all trapped in. And if you can think outside of it, then you're really outside looking out into it, and you're looking from an outtellect. Let me explain that. An intellect is things that we hear, all discuss, communicate back and forth, inscribe. That's intellect. Once I and you can agree on what is this in your hand, and I agree with you that's a microphone, that becomes referred to as common sense. Now there's things going on outside of our vision. There's things that, let's say, the astronomers are still trying to find out about outside there. Things around them, they pretty well have that under control. Things inside the Earth's atmosphere or inside the spheres, they pretty well have those things figured out. That's the intellect. Those things from the outside that they don't or cannot and have not discovered or uncovered, right, or figured out is called outtellect. That's the last point of reason to say it's out of my lectability. It's outside of it. So you say, now, I'm going to talk to you about something outside of my lectability. And I'm going to say, well, I'm going to have to use words that are from intellect. And that's going to cause more confusion. We're going to keep going around because you're on your way to the rim of space where you become an intellectual being and not stay within this realm under his rule as an intellectual being. So we can approach the question as long as you're not asking me to give you intellectual dialogue about intellectual outformation. You follow? Go ahead, try again then. Oh, when you say suppose, you're asking me to have faith. Suppose I'm going to go, okay, so I got to have faith with him.
So can I look at the words?
Yeah. That's what I'm trying to say.
Words.
It's very difficult for everybody, because now you got everybody wondering what you want to say. At least express it the best way you know how. And I'll try to express it back the best way I know how.
When you first explained to us about things being before hydrogen being in the core, and then first recognizing that as non-existence, and now it being a part of existence because they identified it
right.
and made it known to exist.
Living identity.
Right. And you also explained to us that there are sub-atoms or particles that exist beyond the core.
Intellect, right.
Intellect, which makes it, in a sense, the non-existence of what was thought to exist. The non-existent of non-existent.
To those, it's non-existent to those who can't see them.
Right.
Okay.
And my first question was about knowing what was thinking about, which you already answered, I guess, about how those things that are not relative exist in a state that doesn't have, that's before core, in other words. That's what I was thinking.
Okay. Because the moment you said state, we had another problem. but I grasp where you're going. Anybody else?
Right there. We've been given in the books the stories that we've been given in terms of the material, that they are, for lack of a better word, they're a lot more advanced than us. But when you read about some of the things that they've done in their emotional states, in terms of when you'd see Asset and Ray, she wanted information, she wanted the magic word from Ray. That comes across like the same human frailties that we have today.
And not necessity?
Sorry?
And not necessity?
What do you mean by that, not necessity?
If Amun-Re had a sacred word, it opened doorways to health, correct? By me wanting it. And because as a female in that school, I'm not entitled to it. If I figure out a way to get it as a necessity to pass on to other women for that same thing, that still comes across as human frailty.
If she wasn't supposed to have it.
By men. By men. We must hold this to keep her down. We must keep the secrets in the lodge under the symbol of a two-ball cane to keep the female down. Because we can't admit to the world that she is God and we're not. Because we are in control now. And if we ever let go of control, she'll take control. And we won't know whether she's going to get revenge for the way we treated her all these years as a mother gave birth. Because woman is being put in a position where she's being ignored for her ultimate. Or let's go back to Christianity. Mary is being ignored and Christ is given the credit. And according to the Bible, Mary delivered Christ. So without Mary, there'd be no Christ. But in Christianity, and only in the Catholic faith, they even lean toward giving her an influence of any respect. But in other churches, Mary is just the mother of God. Should women feel that we are betraying her, underplaying her? You know what I'm saying? And is it wrong if she seeks to overthrow us? Would that be a human frailty because she said, looking at the condition of the world in the hands of men, and they have the secret, we must get this secret so we can take over. Is that wrong?
No, it isn't.
I'm wondering.
Okay.
I'm with you. I think the problem is, let me go back further. I think the problem is when you hear the word Nectaru, or Nectarat, or Anunnaki, as human beings, you're forgetting that you're a God man also. And are the human weaknesses a symbol of God's weaknesses because God has put his spirit in man? Does that mean, by virtue of the fact that man is a physical manifestation of the Word becoming flesh, an incarnation of a part of God with the Spirit of God moving through him, when any one man does evil, is God condemned as being evil because of that man's weakness? Or is it a title like boss and lord and captain and chief that is bestowed on individuals because they have rank over others? By that I mean, Asalu or Osiris was a deity of the upper or lower world. Upper or lower world? Lower world. So Osiris was sent to the underworld, not the upper world initially. Correct? Amun-Ra raised from the underworld, from Tulun, primordial life, which is a female, or in the egg, as they call it, which is symbolic of the sun, or as they say, the bright morning star in the Bible, right? Raised out of the east and traveled the skies and became the God of the sky. Thus we put God in heaven and say, Our Father who art in heaven. which in a sense says, our Father who is not on earth. Or there'd be no reason to say, our Father who art in heaven. The very statement, our Father who art in heaven, if he is omnipresent, means that he must have been on earth and has now gone to the heavens. Or if he's only in heaven and never been to earth, then he's not omnipresent and not everywhere and in everything at every time. So when they say, so God so loved the world, that he, sent his, so a portion of him is sent as his, to carry his word of salvation and grace into the world. And if Jesus, and Jesus did, at one time become the very Thomas that he talked about, the doubting Thomas. Because at one point he said, what? My God, why have thou? And the word forsaken. When you ask God Almighty, why, you already fell beneath God's level. Man, beast, says to God, why? But God can't ask God why he does a thing, because as God would already know why God does everything. So when Jesus was in that state, and he said, Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani, or my God, Eli, or Eli, Eli, my God, why? Hear that? Why? Then move on to the next statement. Have thou left? Forsaking, the word there in the Hebrew is left me there, or departed from me. Why have thou left me? At that state, God, who was once word, logos, who now was flesh, solid, became mortal. If for no other time in the life of Jesus, at that moment when he said, why, he was no more than another mortal. And when he questioned God as to God's decision to forsake him, was he as bad as when Thomas questioned him about the wounds in his hand in the upper room that rendered or gave Thomas the title Doubting Thomas? I'm going the route of Christianity because this is the Western world doctrine. And of course it came out of Egypt, and the same principles will apply to Osiris coming down the underworld, rising up, and his son coming to earth as Horus, and being challenged and tested by man, Satuk. You follow? It's the same principle.
So the principle in terms of the Tamarian story, what I'm trying to get into my mind is that when you talk about the deities, you look at them.
You do. That's Christianity. That's Judaism, and that's Islam. That's monotheistic beliefs. Is to put God in a position or a place where mortals judge his decisions by themselves. See, what we're saying is, Abraham, if the Bible takes the story of Jesus Christ and takes his family and takes him all the way back from blood to blood, we got, then got to Adam and said, in Adam, the Son of God, then the Bible is putting Jesus' genealogy into God's genes. He calls him the Son of God. He's the same word, you're at birth by God. So Jesus was related to God. You follow? So the things that God did, Jesus could do. The things that, Jesus did, God did. And that's why Jesus said, you'll even do greater works than I am not greater than he who I am my own accord can do. He was trying to tie in the relation. When you see me, you see. You follow what I'm saying? So again, you're putting the Egyptian deity in the same light of the faith that Christianity, Judaism, and Islam demand. Blind faith in a supernatural power that condenses itself into a father or he God image, and therefore is above mistake. You follow? And the first mistake that this God power would have made would be to become less than God and try to remain God. And by that I mean, by virtue of the fact that he created something from himself. If the Bible be true, for those who accept it, he said, I what? Created man in my image, my own image, after my own likeness, and I blew into him of my breath, and he became a living. So a portion of God departed from God and became Adam, and a portion of God departed from God and through Adam became Jesus. You with me? So now, if God is God in totality as God, if a portion is taken away from him, is he still totally God? Or does he become less than God? If I take some milk out of the container, it's milk, but it's not the full container of milk. So now the question is, God can do everything except become less than God and still be God. So you say, what is it that God can't do? He can't become less than himself. He can't act contrary to being God and still be God. And that's why I told people, never fear devil worshippers. You don't have to worry about devil worshippers. Satan is going to deceive them. That's his job. Satan can't even be honest to his own people because he won't be Satan. If Satan ever tries to be nice to a Satan worshiper, he would no longer be Satan. So all the Satan worshippers got a big problem. And when Satan acts upon his known nature and they complain, it's going to be the same story. You knew I was a snake when you picked me up. You hear me? I'm going to get around to that. So now, the natural are your blood relatives. What you think, feel, is how they think and feel. You have just given a different definition to God because some beast have reduced you from God to man. And now you're thinking from the mind of a man and have separated yourself from your godly state. Godliness is taking control. Godliness is responsibility. But not responsibility in the sense of I am obliged to respond, but the power to respond. The power to take. You follow what I'm saying? Go ahead. Bring the mic up.
We hear about the wisdom of the Tamarian culture, yeah? But when I read about the wisdom, and I read stories as the examples like Satuk and Osiris, they don't marry up.
Because you're at the 46, you're looking at the 46 dynastic periods. You're not even dealing with the Neolithic period. You're not dealing with when they admit that God's walked on earth. You're dealing, the Bible says it. The sons of God came down in Genesis chapter 6. And God and his host was walking in the garden in the cool of the day. This was before there was a law called the Torah. This was before there was a law called the Quran. There was no Bible. But God's walked the earth. You only had to refer to him as one God after there was a law given by Moshe or Musa or Moses that defined him as the one God. Prior to that, there was no mention of one God in the Bible. There was no restriction to what God did or did not do. Because in the Old Testament, that very God repented. After creating man and men went bad, he repented. That's not the nature of a God who doesn't make mistakes, who's all wise, right, and exact. I think the problem is you're mixing up Osiris and Isis and Hathor, which were human beings, incarnated in the flesh, Nephilians, Jebedians, who came into the flesh and made it with the Gibor, or Jebor, which is a Gibbon, a certain species of tailless monkey, and those people you're calling gods. And those people have the same nature as you. You just didn't incarnate, you were conceived. And now when you go back and study any book written by anybody who studies Egyptology, they say we can only go back to Namir, the first pharaoh. And that starts the dynasties. He said from then on down to the Ptolemy Roman invasion, and then fade on out into Anwar Sadat and the Muslim invasion and take it over. Now, what was along the Nile before the 46 dynasties? Because it is not a fact that Khufu built the pyramids. It's a fact that Khufu renovated the pyramids. Aging is proven that the pyramids go back 10,000, well, Sphinx itself goes back 10,500 years, and the pyramids are going back 17 million years.
During a series of readings in the 1930s, Casey prophesied at length about the monuments on the Giza Plateau, revealing what he believed to be the origin of the Sphinx.
It was like he was in the deep unconscious mind, and he was accessing the universal consciousness that contained all wisdom. And when they asked him specifically about ancient Egypt, he said that this place was built in the year 10,500 BC, and that these dates would be supported somewhere around 1998.
Mainstream archaeologists date the Sphinx and the Great Pyramid at Giza to 2500 BC, when they were built to honor the pharaohs of the 4th dynasty. Casey's date of 10,500 BC is dismissed by mainstream science, but a few researchers are coming forward, as Casey predicted, to support his unorthodox view.
I could see that in the geology lay the key to this total reversal of history.
John Anthony West is a self-described rogue Egyptologist. He believes that the pattern of erosion on the Sphinx rules out the mainstream date of 2500 BC.
In a nutshell, the theory is that the Sphinx has been weathered by water, and specifically by rain falling down over the plateau over many thousands of years. You look at the Sphinx and you see that it's this rounded profile with deep fissures going down the rock face. This can only be produced by rainfall falling over the plateau.
Rain erosion in the Sahara is impossible now. But before 10,000 BC, this part of Africa was a fertile grassland. So, West points out in his book, if the Sphinx has been eroded by water, it must date back before 10,000 BC. The same conclusion, using different evidence, has also been reached by authors Robert Bauval and Graham Hancock.
Help us understand the mirror image of the monuments at Giza and the sky at certain points in time, because that's key to understanding the entire concept you're putting forward.
There is only one time where the image of the sky locks with the image on the ground. And this occurs, and only occurs, in 10,500 BC.
Bauval and Hancock have discovered that the Egyptian sky in 10,500 BC bears an uncanny resemblance to the layout of the monuments on the Giza Plateau.
10,500 BC, this is when the Sphinx is gazing directly at his own image, the constellation of Leo. And if we are to turn 90 degrees and face due south, we would see the 3 stars of Orion's belt in a pattern that mimics exactly the pattern of the pyramid on the ground. So we have here a perfect conjunction taking place only and only in 10,500 BC.
Now what people roamed that area, up and down the Nile, across the Tigris, Euphrates, all that area, before they started putting on Egyptian clothes and walking around with sticks and putting on masks of animals over their head for rituals. There was another being there called pygmies, or Danig. I think I explained that last week. Was it last week? I explained that last week. The pygmies, the Danig. This is recorded. They were here first. They're the we and us, the they in the Bible. And those beings said, let us make a man in our image, and the manifestation of what they created was an Adamite. They were called Kedmonites. Those Adamites is from the word Adam or Edom, which means red, ruddy. That's the creation of the white race. Or one of the branches of the white race, because people think the white race is one race. And there's a whole bunch there's 11 branches of the white race. And it was all created at different times. You follow? Yep. So you had gods who were walking the earth in Africa, who had contact with beings called Eluls, who hadn't even come to earth, that were communicating with them from mind to mind, the same way the Bible says. Then Noah was minding his business, and a voice from heaven said, Noah. Same principle, that Muhammad was up in the cave, meditating and fasting, and someone came in the cave in the form of a power of light and said, Muhammad, Ikra. And Muhammad didn't stop and say, where are you coming from? Noah didn't stop and say, God or whomever that is talking, where are you talking to me from? Or exactly how far away are you from tell me, and why am I able to hear you? What method is it, a cell phone? You may laugh, but to think that God didn't have a cell phone 4,000 years ago is again to belittle God. To think that God didn't have a television or video recorder. Because if you can figure it out, then it was in the mind of God, because there's nothing in your mind that didn't come from God if your mind did come from God. I know mine did. So anything you have today, plain saying God already had in his mind. I was explaining that to someone yesterday. We talked about DNAs in God. And I was saying, well, man is studying DNAs. And DNAs are intelligent and thinking and changing and growing. Correct? Now let's reverse the psychology. Who was there first? Your chromosomes or you? The chromosome. So now let's ask the question. Is man studying chromosomes, or is chromosomes using man to study itself? A way to clone man out of existence by making such a perfect man that he'd no longer be a man. He would be merely a chromosome. Man's own destruction is within inside man's ability to think of his own destruction and to create destructive vessels and means in the form of weapons and emotions. So again, to get back to the question, we don't get too far. You're talking about a period of time when the gods had become men. There was thousands of years before that. Before, when Adam and Eve was in the garden, right? The trees had to grow in the garden before Adam and Eve got in the garden. And we can justify that because we have the 7-day creation. But then, as I said many times, when we get down to the element gold, and the Bible speaks of how good, God talks about how good the gold was in Ethiopia, and Adam and Eve wasn't in the garden of Ethiopia according to the Christian belief. Adam and Eve was over near the Tigris Euphrates. That's their biblical belief. That's where the Jehovah's Witnesses and all the science, all those groups were put in. So now, if God is incarnating man over in the Middle East, but making reference to the gold in Ethiopia, then God must have visited the gold in Ethiopia before he created man over in the East. And maybe that's why he said he put the man who he created in the East, because he originally created him in Ethiopia. And while there, he saw the gold was good. So if God looked down and saw the gold was good in Ethiopia while he was creating man, then the gold wasn't his. Yeah, because if it was his, he wouldn't have to make a differentiation between it being good or bad gold, because it's God's gold. And all of God's gold got to be good. Not only that, the Ethiopians must have had gold that was better than God's gold, because God said that gold was good. So the Jewish God had to come up against the Ethiopian gods where the gold was good. And in that land of Ethiopia, where God must have created Adam and Eve and then put them eastward in the garden. You see, I'm going back to how it proves that people existed here before. And then how long does it take for gold to become gold?
As the mysteries of Egypt intrigued you, the secrets of the pyramids, and the scientists that built them. Well, now you can have these secrets. Now you can enter into ancient Egyptian order and learn who and what you are. Who built the pyramids? Why? Medicine, alchemy, the secrets of symbolism revealed to you. Enter the ancient Egyptian order now.